Greetings, welcome. We're gonna give a minute or so here for folks to come into the room. We're so excited to have you all here for the second session of the Spirit of the Black Men's Gathering. This is last night for those who were able to tune in. I know it was a very moving experience, and we're so excited to be continuing today with this session and tomorrow again at 1 o'clock as well. So it's going to be you know, a really wonderful combination. My name is Robert Sapiro, and I'm here from on behalf of Greenacre and the Greenacre team, and just sharing a couple of very brief remarks before we dive into the heart of our exploration today about art from the Black Men's Gathering and this tribute to Robert Hayden, which we're just so so deeply grateful and moved to be able to be part of. This has been part of a series about the Pupil of the Eye art series. We have a virtual art show, which is up right now on our website, greenacre.news. Check that out in terms of the art show. There's some really beautiful visual pieces up there. We've been having a series of conversations, and part of the consultations naturally emerged this desire to explore the spirit of the Black Men's Gathering and to consult with Dr. William Roberts about the idea of having what we thought at first would be one evening, and we're so grateful it's turned into this series of 3. There's lots that could be said about Greenacre. Some of you may be familiar. I'll leave it just simply at Greenacre, this spot along the Piscataqua River, which was originally the home of the Wabanaki people, has been a place where people have been gathering and talking about the big issues of the day and of really the big issues facing humanity, particularly around the oneness of humanity, for over 100 years, and that continues to be our important mission. You know, thinking back 1929, we had a race amity conference here, and there's been so many, including, of course, the Black Men's Gathering, things that have happened here. So without too much ado, I'm going to hand it over to Jessica Gaines, who's our program coordinator, and she'll talk a little bit about some of the logistics for our time, and then we'll dive into the program after that.
Thanks, Robert. Hey, everybody. So glad to have you all with us. Glad you can join us. So we're going to have, this presentation is going to run about 1.5 hours, and at the end we'll have some time for Q&A. So we have 2 places where you can put comments. One is in the chat box. If you take your cursor and move it towards the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see the chat box down there. Or you can subsequently, if you don't see it, you can go down, take your cursor down to the bottom of the screen, and you'll see a few icons pop up. The one in the middle says chat. Feel free to chat away with everybody. We can all hear what each other, see what each other is typing. Last night it was nice. We were all, you know, just kind of commenting on what was happening. And Frank was saying it was kind of like a live social media feed. Now, if you actually have a question that you would like to address to our panelists, please put that in the Q&A box so it doesn't get lost in the chat box. The Q&A box, again, move your cursor to the bottom of your screen and you'll see an icon that says Q&A. Go ahead and put it in there. And please, in that question, let me know if you want to ask it yourself. I can turn your mic on, or if you would like me to ask it for you. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Roberts.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's good to be here with all of you. I'd just like to begin by just saying how excited we are to welcome you and to introduce you to some amazing artists who are part of the Black Men's Gathering. Our intent is to invite you to connect with the spirit of the Black Men's Gathering. and to discover the possibilities for building bridges of unity. Artists have long been celebrated for many reasons, but here in the gathering, their contributions are not secondary or just supportive, but are central to the process. In prayer, in study, in reflection, even in recreation, as well as in tribute. So for example, in the midst of prayer, which we talked about last night, you may at some point hear some brother pick up his horn or his harmonica and play a flute and play with a prayer. In the midst of study, someone may start humming something, you know, that is a quotation that they've memorized. In reflection, or even in recreation, after long days of prayer and study, just before, you know, we sort of begin another section, we may take time to really sing together or dance together, or, you know, just to take the tedium away. And of course, in tribute to those souls who've gone on, we pay homage through the arts. Among the many artists whose contributions have intertwined the proceedings of the gathering, and I want to give you a list of some of them. Hopefully I haven't forgotten too many. And I'll start with Lloyd Lawrence from New York, who is sometimes called a performance artist, but really is quite an astounding, you know, artist that has presented in many different mediums. His collaborator, Ken Ray, is also another one of those who have contributed mightily to the gathering. I'll mention some other names. Anis Mojgani, who is now coincidentally the poet laureate for the state of Oregon. He's a spoken word artist. Walter Heath, the singer, his son Jamie Heath, both wonderful musicians. Mickey Ingram, who's a flautist. David Clausen, who's a drummer. Oluyemi Thomas, who you'll hear in a moment. His brother Ken Thomas. Roger Hogan, who you'll hear later in the program. Many of you know Van Gilmer or Eric Dozier. Metallica Banda. Jerry Hampton, who's a French hornist. George Simons from Bermuda. Don Camp, whose work you'll hear about. Julia Smith, who's gone on to the next world, who had a voice that was astounding. His brother Burton. Hassan Malouf. Patrick Patillo, you'll hear today, is a poet. Jamar Wheeler, another poet. J.P. Allen, an old school songster. Reggie Davis, John Sneed, Sean Anderson and Ron Brown. So these are some of the brothers who were a part of that body of artists who contributed mightily to the gathering and who helped us to learn the importance of bringing this wonderful gift to help inspire us and lift our spirits and really help to focus us. So today, what we're going to do is to open with a little comment by Oluyemi Thomas and hear some of his music, which is a tribute. It's called Lightness into Darkness, or Darkness into Lightness. And it's a tribute to Robert Hayden. And then we'll hear from Dr. Smith, and then from Patrick Patillo, and then from Don Camp. And then we'll open it up for questions, and then we'll close with some music from Robert Hayden. I mean, from Roger Hogan. Now, last night I mentioned a book that my wife was given by a friend of ours, Joanne Nato. And I want to mention it again because I think the artist is actually here today. And her name is Andrea Hope. And she has this little book that I just am so thrilled about. It's called Will You Break the Silence? Will You Break the Silence? And you can find it on Amazon. And unbeknownst to me, she dedicated it to her, I think her uncle, and to the Black Men's Gathering. So I had a note from her today because I wrote to her saying how wonderful I was, how thrilled I was about it. And so she wrote back saying that she was very touched to be acknowledged and that she was really, her uncle always wanted to participate in the gathering, and she and he participated in the DC gatherings. So we consider you a part of the gathering. So now let me just start this little screen share because I want you to hear a little of Oluyemi Thomas and what he has to say. So here's Oluyemi Thomas, friends.
This is Oluyemi Thomas, bass clarinet. I had the great honor to be invited to lunch by Mr. Robert Hayden back in the 70s, mid-70s, in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And we spoke about the evolving arts and being adventurous in our works. He was very interested in getting a clear understanding of my approach to composition and intuition, creativity, and how I integrated it in my life. And it was such a pleasure because he kept his eyes on me and he had a wonderful smile, as well as he just wanted to know what another artist think and how they operate. He also invited me over his home for a Bahá'í fireside and to his poetry session at the University of Michigan, where he was professor. And he's just a wonderful person, you know. I'm glad to have known him, and he makes me happy every time I think about him. Peace be with you, brother. Love you.
We pay tribute to Robert Hayden. That was Oluyemi Thomas, Darkness Embraces Light. Thank you very much, Oluyemi. So friends, I'd like to now just introduce you to Dr. Derik Smith, who's a professor at the Claremont colleges in California. And he's written a recent volume called Robert Hayden in Verse, Robert Hayden in Verse. And on the link that you use to register, there's actually a connection. You could hit that link and go and be able to purchase this book. It's really quite an amazing volume. So we're really pleased to have Derik with us. And so I'd like to ask you to join me in welcoming Dr. Smith.
Thank you so much, Billy. And thank you to Green Acre for hosting us here, and to be with Patrick and Don in this context is really special for me. In the Black Men's Gathering, you know, I've learned so much about so many different things. It's kind of hard for me to know where to begin in terms of sharing my understanding of the spirit of the gathering, because it's so vast and immense. And of course, Dr. Roberts, but also people like Patrick and Don have, you know, been critical to my own sort of development as a spiritual person, and as a thinker, and as a person trying to live up to the standard of the revelation that's laid out for us in the revelation of Baha'u'llah. So it's really just a great honor to be able to reflect on that experience with the gathering after all these years. I guess it's not that many years, but you know, almost a decade now since we've been together in that context. And I think one of the beautiful things about the gathering, and I think a testament to how incredible it is that my understanding of it and what was happening in the gathering keeps on evolving. It keeps on learning. I keep on learning more about actually what that was. And you know, in recent months, recent weeks, I had the opportunity to really think deeply about the gathering for a little while. And as I did that, it just, it struck me how much was there that I didn't even appreciate, because I hadn't really spent time contemplating it deeply enough over the last few years. And when I actually began to do that, it sort of opened itself up to me in a way that, you know, it hadn't really done before. And I began to see some of its beauty and some of its genius in new ways. And one of the things that I think I really recognized was that, you know, in the gathering, what I learned about was the oneness of humanity. I learned a lot about that. And I learned a lot about unity within diversity. And so some might think that, well, in this collection of people who are, you know, the same gender, the same racial background, all these Black men, that it's not really so much about the oneness of humanity, but in fact, that's really what I was experiencing in it. And within that collective, there was such a range of diversity that it would be impossible to really sort of identify almost like one common thing that sort of ran between us, except that we were Black men and we were Baha'is. That was the only thing. Other than that, what we saw is this sort of incredible diversity of humanity. And when we gathered together, what we were doing, I felt, was what was given, the vision that was given to humanity by Baha'u'llah, which was trying to do this thing of building heaven on earth. And last night, one of the brothers said that what he experienced in the gathering was like a slice of heaven on earth. And I really feel like that's what we were learning about. We were learning about that future kingdom, which we are trying to build here as Baha'is in this time. So it was almost like, and you know, there's so many ways to describe the gathering, but I think one of the ways is that it was like a time traveling machine. Like we went into the future to a moment when relationships between human beings, right, are going to be reconceptualized, right, reimagined in ways that it's hard to even think about right now. So when we went into the gathering, we entered this space of, you know, that was kind of like, you know, it makes me think of that, the Lord's Prayer, where the disciples asked Jesus about what it was that they were how they were supposed to pray, right? And he said, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven," right? And in that sort of heavenly atmosphere of the gathering, it was like we were learning how to be, in that way that the future is going to make available to more and more people. And so we who were part of the gathering were blessed with this opportunity to kind of operate in a new way, something that was kind of very different than anything I had ever seen before. And it's also, I have to always contemplate and meditate about this, like that Baha'u'llah kind of, raised up some people, and particularly, the capable facilitator, Billy, to sort of conjure this space, right? And that space of heaven, of the future, of the kingdom of God on earth was made available to a short amount of time to some people who, have really borne the brunt of history's oppressions, Black men. And when we think of the oneness of humanity, we often think of all these different kind of races and cultures and people coming together in unity. But we also have to think that within each of those races and cultures and subsets of humanity, there's a lot of war that's going on, right? And when the Black Men's Gathering was first coming into a being, and still today, right, the war between Black men is intense, right? And we can, leave aside all the reasons for that warring, right? But that warring takes place. And so what we experienced when we came together in the gathering was like this place of the oneness of humanity amongst people who in usual times might be at war with one another, right? But we came together characterized in a community characterized by love, unity, justice, and equity, right? And in order to make that community really occur, right, we had to have certain watchwords that we abided by, right? And so some of those were humility, right? That was one of the things I learned so much about in the gathering, was like the importance of humility. Everyone came to the gathering on equal terms, right? And it didn't matter what your background was, right? It didn't matter what kind of attainments you had within that kingdom of names, right? Or that, the titles and so forth. You came as an equal participant into the gathering, right? And so in that context, it was possible, in that context infused with prayer, right? It was possible to experience a new kind of love where it wasn't about your title or the way that you postured yourself, right? That was absolutely kind of like forbidden, not in an explicit way, but in an implicit way. And one time, I'll just share a story. I had the opportunity to sort of lead some of the sort of proceedings in the gathering on one occasion. And then after that occurred, we went back to the dorms where we stay at Green Acre, and everyone was real quiet when I came into the room. And these are all, people about my age, brothers about my age. And they said to me, Derik, we really got to talk to you because, we really felt that in today's gathering, you were posturing. And they held it for a minute, They kind of let me know that they were joking and they were embracing me, in that moment. But it was like frightening to me. It was like the worst thing that could happen to you in the gathering was to be called out as doing that, right? And so that brings to mind like this level of humility that everyone had to bring into that space. And when we brought it into that space, there were things that were honored, right? There were things that were honored, and of course, the thing that was honored the most, right, was service to humanity at large and service to the cause in particular, right? And so that was the thing that was really highlighted. When you came back after 1 year of being away, you came back into the space of the gathering, the only thing that people really wanted to know about, the only thing that people cared about was what service you had done, what service you had rendered, And so those were the terms of this kind of like new community, right, of human beings that happened to be Black men, right? And those were the terms that we operated on. And so in that context, like I learned so much about like what the oneness of humanity is really about, and what it looks like when you have true unity within diversity. So it's kind of like counterintuitive, right? You think of the Black Men's Gathering as a very specific thing, right? But in fact, what I was learning about in my own mind was all of these fundamental concepts of the revelation of Baha'u'llah as it applies to all people. And so I think that embedded into that kind of community, that unique community, was all types of like just wondrous elements of the future that we're gonna have, right? And the future that we're gonna have is going to be, we know, in one that in which arts are honored, right? And so it was so sort of fascinating to see how the arts were integrated into everything that we did in the gathering. And sort of Billy spoke to this earlier, right? It was an organic kind of integration, right? But it was this integration of the arts in a very diverse way, right? And, you know, it's not as though, oh, you think, oh, this is the arts of Black men, so it has some kind of like, you know, commonality. In fact, there's like this whole incredible range of arts, right? And of course, we know about the music. And of course, within that sort of, let's say that subcategory of arts of the music, there's a whole range. And so last night when Billy ended the session, we heard hip hop, right? And then today when we begin the session, we had Oluyemi playing experimentalist jazz. And I didn't really know too much about experimentalist jazz until I heard Oluyemi play at the gathering. And it kind of opened my mind in like a way that I had never, you know, experienced before, right? And so we also had sort of straight ahead jazz players, right? We had people who would just get on the piano and just, you know, play some sort of standard jazz piece. We had people in the R&B mode, in the spirituals, right? In gospels, right? There were all these different kinds of genres, this diversity of musical genres that we heard in the gathering. And of course, then there was other kinds of arts, right? It was the visual arts. I mean, I remember times when we could have gathered around and looked at paintings, you know, to honor the work of one of the brothers who had, you know, who had done something in the visual arts. There were crafts that we honored. You know, we kind of gathered around like, look at this, the beauty of this piece. And of course, you know, that kind of indelible, the power of storytelling, right? That was so critical to the gathering, right? So all of these elements of the arts were kind of integrated into this community that was, you know, something that, you know, it was a special thing. It was a gift that was given to a few people at a particular moment in history. And I feel, as I said, it's a glimpse into the future of what community will be like in the future, what we're trying to build, right? And so, of course, within the arts, one of the kinds of genres, one of the forms that we honored was poetry. There was a lot of poetry that would happen at the gathering, right? And people would do recitations. And it didn't, you know, there were great poets like Anis Mojgani, who Billy was just referencing, right? And there were other poets, right? People who were just coming together, you know, offering their little piece. But everyone was honored in that artistic creation, right? And it allowed for the kind of human flourishing that we can only hope to build like in the future, right? That's what these communities build. They allow for humanity to flourish in a way that I'd never seen before, right? And so when I was in that context, I learned so much about arts, but also about spirituality. And I got this sort of glimpse of like, what I feel is the community, the beloved community that Baha'u'llah has sort of come to bring. Now, the man who we're honoring today, Robert Hayden, was a firm believer in this revelation of Baha'u'llah. And I oftentimes wonder about how he would have responded to the gathering, right? Because Hayden, it seemed to me, Robert Hayden was one of the great American poets of the 20th century. He's generally regarded as such, right? But Hayden, as I sort of explored him more, was a really tortured human being. You know what I'm saying? Like he struggled, right? And part of his struggle was maintaining faith in the vision of Baha'u'llah in a world that was surrounded by so much evil and oppression, right? And so you can see this tension playing out in his art, to my mind, between this hope and this belief in a future that could be built, right? Primarily according to the principles of Baha'u'llah, and the reality that he experienced, throughout his life, and how he observed in a very sensitive way the world in which he lived. Now, Hayden didn't have the bounty and the blessing of seeing that glimpse of the future in the gathering, right? And I oftentimes, as I said, wonder about how he would have responded to it. And I wonder, like, what his art would have made of the gathering, like how he would have rendered the gathering into art. Because in some ways, it was the encapsulation of what he wanted to see, I think, within the human experience. There's just a couple lines that I want to read from Hayden that kind of exemplify his longing for humanity. And this is from a poem which is very tellingly titled Words in the Morning Time, right? So we see the double meaning of the word morning, right? It's words at dawn, right? But it's also words of mourning, to be in grief, right? And I'll read a couple of different stanzas from this long poem. But one of the things that becomes clear is that it was Baha'u'llah's vision, right, that allowed him to keep on going when he saw so much evil around him, right? And so you'll hear that in this stanza that I'm going to read now, in which he's thinking about this era of the late 1960s and the late 1970s, in which there was so much kind of social turmoil, right? And geopolitical violence, and violence being visited on Black people, and violence just occurring in the American community in a way that is perhaps unprecedented, even in our contemporary moment. He said, I grieve, yet know the vanity of grief. Through the power of the blessed exile's trans-illuminating word, aware of how these deaths, how all the agonies of our deathbed, childbed, age, our process, major means whereby, oh dreadfully, our humanness must be achieved. And so if you read deeply into these stanzas, what you hear, right, is this idea of humanity progressing toward a greater, a condition of greater possibility, right? And that the way in which we get there is through all of this pain, right? And so as we encounter this pain in our lived realities, one of the things that we are going to naturally experience is grief. And because Hayden was so sensitive, he experienced this grief in a very deep way. But the thing that carried him through was belief in the revelation of Baha'u'llah. And later on in that same poem, he has this kind of directive toward his audience, toward his readers, toward all of humanity, where he says, what we have to do is, quote, "Oh, master now loves instruments, complex and not for the fearful, simple and not for the foolish. Master now loves instruments." Now in the gathering, I believe that's what we were learning how to do, right? Master the instruments, like in the musical sense of the word, but also like in the technical sense of the word. It wasn't just an expression of arts. It was arts combined with the study of the plans that were coming to us from the Universal House of Justice, right? We were mastering these two kinds of instruments. They could say instruments of the heart and instruments of the intellect simultaneously. And through that, we were learning how to love and build a community. And so the brothers went out from that gathering, from that space where they were learning that mastery, and they were attempting to sort of live out the revelation that Hayden believed so deeply in, right? Now, my own kind of education in what it means to be a human being, what it means to be a Baha'i, was, you know, deeply influenced by my sort of work on Hayden, right? And as I said, also, my own education in all these things was really advanced and structured by the gathering. And one of the things that I learned is not only the sort of great appreciation of like the diversity of Blackness, right? That was one of the things that I think I really learned to appreciate. But also like the very style in which I wrote, you know, I was one of the people who from time to time was given the bounty and the task, very difficult task, of writing letters to the institutions that we always addressed each year in the gathering, right? That expressed our gratitude and our thanks for the guidance, right, given to us from the Universal House of Justice, from the National Spiritual Assembly. And, you know, I would oftentimes observe really closely how other brothers wrote these letters, right, and the language that we use. And I would try to emulate that, and I would try to sort of craft my prose in a way that was similar to the language that was being used in these letters that we worked really, really hard on, right, to send to institutions like the National Spiritual Assembly, like the Universal House of Justice, right? So I learned a lot about my own kind of, you know, craft of writing, you know, in that context. But also perhaps like most importantly, like I learned a greater understanding of the need for the creation of community not characterized by conflict and competition and confrontation, right? Because those are the means by which we seem to sort of operate in society at large. In the gathering, those were not the means of operation, right? And I learned a lot about how I could then create a kind of scholarship that I do, you know, based on those principles of love and unity rather than conflict and competition. And so in the book that I wrote about Hayden, what I tried to do is take an existing discourse about Hayden, which kind of always had him in conflict and competition with other African-American poets of the same time period, right? And it said, oh, Hayden was over here doing his thing about the oneness of humanity and the erasure of racial difference. And these other poets are over here doing a kind of Black nationalist separatist thing, right? And they are always in conflict and competition. And through the understandings that I gained from the gathering and through my understanding of the revelation of Baha'u'llah, I understood that it was necessary to try and recast our understanding of Hayden, right? So that we look at him not as in competition and conflict with these other Black artists, right? But actually in a kind of harmonious building of artistic expression, right? So that what these Black artists of the 1960s and 70s were doing with their militancy was something similar to what Hayden was doing with his very much Baha'i inspired art, right? They were trying to sort of build a new world that wasn't founded exclusively on the principles of the Black church, right? And wasn't founded exclusively on these materialist principles of the secular West, right? And so what I tried to do in my book was show how Hayden found the Baha'i faith as the most effective way of creating art that wasn't grounded in the Black church, and it wasn't simply grounded in secular Western thought, right? It was this new thing, this new Baha'i vision, right, that he invested in. And that was just a little bit different, right, than what these Black nationalist authors were trying to do, which was deal with the same struggle that Hayden did, but they came at it from a different angle. And so rather than putting them at odds with one another, I tried to see what are the common ground that we can see beneath these kinds of artists, right? So that was what my book was primarily trying to do. And I learned so much about the impulse, right, that was supposed to guide the scholarship that I wanted to do at the gathering. I learned so much about what art is, and I learned so much about how to sort of appreciate unity and diversity and work toward that community that we are trying to build as Baha'is, in which we see the kingdom of heaven here built on earth. And I think we got to experience a little bit of that in the gathering. And of course, as you know, every brother will say, it's just a great honor and a bounty to have had that experience. And the only thing that we can do really to repay that honor and bounty is to try and, bring that spirit to others. And I feel like this is what this gathering here in this beautiful Zoom space has done, is just bring us together to perpetuate that spirit. And also I want to just say, before handing over to Patrick, that my work was advanced not only in these kind of conceptual ways, but also in spiritual ways, but also just in very material ways. Like without the assistance of Billy and Patrick, I probably couldn't have put the book, it wouldn't have existed in as a material thing. They did key things for me in making my work possible. So I'm just grateful to the gathering, to the brothers of the gathering in so many different respects. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Derik. Very moving presentation. Thank you so much. So friends, now I'd like to introduce you to Patrick Patillo. He happens to be the son-in-law of Robert Hayden, a wonderful poet. He has many qualities, which I admire. And so Patrick, I'd like to welcome you. Patrick.
Hello, up, our friends. Glory to the all glorious. Billy said he had a lot of qualities he's admired. That's because it's people watching. Hey, I'm proud of you, Dad. Proud of you, bro. Proud of you. But anyway, I'm gonna read a couple of poems. Then, first, Robert Hayden had one daughter. Her name is Maya. She's upstairs. My wife is ill. She sends her love. I'm a worker. Sometimes it gets on my nerve, but I'm a worker. So I say that to say this. She's upstairs. She sends her love. I said, what you want me to say to the people, man? She said, tell them what you're gonna tell them and leave it alone. But she said, could you fry me some chicken livers when it's over? That's where I'm at. You know what I mean? So anyway, so Allahu Akbar, friends. And as far as the gathering pretty much saved my life. Let me say this before I read these poems. Everybody, this is about Robert Hayden, but Irma Hayden was the Bahá'í that taught Robert Hayden. Irma Hayden, Maya's mother, Irma Hayden, who is the one, it went from Abdu'l-Baha to Dorothy Baker. And Dorothy Baker taught Irma Hayden, who taught Robert Hayden, who taught my wife Maya Hayden, and who taught the woman that introduced me to the faith. Her name is Rose Martin. Mother taught her. So I don't want to, mother, and I fell in love with mother before I fell in love with Maya, And all men know their wife when they see them. All men know their wife when they see them. They see other women, but they know their wife when they see them. Even though she on my nerve, that's it. I love her. All right, so this is called Carnival Disc. Man, but the Black Men's Gathering saved my life. I want you to understand that. I became a Baha'i in 1987. I met Billy in Mother introduced me to Billy. It was a 10-year, they were celebrating Mr. Hayden's passing, the 10 years at the University of Michigan. Billy was a Continental Consular. I didn't know what a Continental Consular was. My wife and mother said, come on, we have to go here. I went. So what really impressed me was that Ann Arbor is a college town, and we were at the university. And they had the dinner they served, it was pizza and pop. And Billy probably don't remember all this. But Billy said, okay, where's the food? Where's the greens and the cornbread? And I laughed. I mean, that touched my heart because, man, I'm a reluctant intellectual, but man, I'm a common person. I'm a common man. I'm gonna stay that way. But anyway, this is called Carnival Disc. See me, the motherless child, dancing the hemispheres in the smiling pathological abyss, Earth's profound clown, in hysterics, satire sitcom, in fool's cap, gingerly soft-shoeing, picturesque, flashing neon lights, depicting sanity, winged zebras juggling red balls of desire leading to desperation, blue of hope and complacence, and green of growth and impatience, merry-go-rounds and Ferris wheels, peak cotton candy, embellishing children's smiles and mauling times interlace. Here's what it is. If you have to explain it, it ain't worth writing. All right, I'm gonna read one more. And then I'm gonna talk about it again a little bit, then I'm gonna leave it alone. This one I wrote years ago, but I changed it. Watching, what's the name of that hall, Billy? Freedom Hall. We met in all the time.
Bahá'í Hall.
Bahá'í Hall. Freedom Hall was down the road at first when we first went there.
Yes.
All right. We from Bahá'í Hall and we marched
Fellowship House.
Fellowship House. We went from Fellowship House to Farmer to eat. And I used to sit on that porch and watch the brothers go up that hill. And this is where this comes from. It's called Valley of the Kings. Marched up the steep incline from the Valley of the Kings. Missions were assigned, armament prepared with a daily battle determination. All present and accounted for. Old valiant kings that endured, the steadfast battle-scarred, and young romantics. Prayers were long, and consultation was longer. Marched up the steep incline from the Valley of the Kings. Through divine intervention, the light of the Spirit shall shine through the pupil of the eye. This is the promise manifested through the Baha'i Black Man's Gathering. All right, so, all right. Can I stop there, Billy?
You can. Thank you very much, Patrick.
Lawapa, friends.
Thank you very much. Well, friends, and now I'd like to introduce you to Donald E. Camp, I'm told. And I think in the chat box, he has put a website where you can actually go and see his work on exhibit. He's an award-winning photographer and also professor at the University Emeritus. And so really we welcome Donald Camp. Don, please.
Thank you very, very much. Derik, I'm so pleased to be on this program with all of you. I mean, Derik, I am in awe of you. If I had your intelligence at your age, I'd be so much further ahead. And Patrick, I want to thank you. I've never had a chance to thank you before, but I'm thanking you for your kindness in 1987. You were kind to me in a very different way, and you helped to change my life. Thank you. And Billy, thank you for inviting me to share that, to share something special, and for inviting me to be here today. I want to share something I wrote called Dust-Shaped Hearts, Heart Shapes in the Dust, Robert Hayden and me. Photographers are visual storytellers. Some years ago during a conversation, someone told me, it's always about you. And I thought a lot about that phrase since I heard it. And I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. But truth be told, I often feel that it's about me. So I'm going to share me. In 1940, for me, two important things happened. Now, the first important thing is that was the year I was born. The second important thing that happened that year is something I wouldn't realize until more than 5 decades later, its importance. In 1940, a book of poetry titled Heart Shape in the Dust was published. It would make an important contribution in my life 5 decades later. Now, I didn't then, nor do I now, know much about poetry. I do know that I love how words can shape something meaningful. Someone wrote that in a book called My Visit to Acre, that Abdu'l-Baha said, poetry is much more effective and complete than prose. It stirs more deeply, for it is of a finer composition. I kind of like to think about my photography as poetry, visual poetry. In 1976, I was 36 years old, and I heard the name Robert Hayden for the first time. Mr. Hayden had been named the Poet Laureate Consultant in Poetry to the Library of Congress, commonly referred to as the United States Poet Laureate. Now, I read in the Bahá'í news that he was a Bahá'í, and I learned from the photograph that accompanied the news that he was a Black man. Now, as a visual artist, I knew of Mark Tobey, a painter, and Bernard Leach, a poet. But now here was a new artist, a poet, a Bahá'í poet, a Black poet, and he'd been named Poet Laureate Consultant in Poetry to the Library of Congress. And I knew that he was the first African-American writer to hold that office. I remember being very proud to have those links with him. I felt like I had company as a Bahá'í who was a Black man, who had opened a door in America that had been closed to Black people for decades. He made me feel like somebody. Now, in 1976, and there were a lot of previously closed doors that opened to Black people in the 70s, during the post-civil rights movement. The civil rights movement itself opened many previously closed doors to many opportunities to be the first Black person to do, to be, to enter. And in 1976, when he became Poet Laureate, I'd been working for 4 years as a newspaper photographer. I was fortunate to be one of those first who had the opportunity to go through those previously closed doors. I became the first Black photographer to be on the staff of a major daily city newspaper. In 1972, I joined the photography staff of the Philadelphia Evening and Sunday Bulletin. That newspaper was the 4th daily newspaper in America to have a Black photographer on their staff. I had become a part of what Baha'u'llah wrote was a new instrument for humanity. He wrote in the Tablet of Tarzan, "In this day, the mysteries of this earth are unfolded and visible before the eyes, and the pages of swiftly appearing newspapers are indeed the mirror of the world. They display the doings and actions of different nations. They both illustrate them and cause them to be heard. Newspapers are as a mirror endowed with hearing, sight, and speech. They are a wonderful phenomenon and a great matter." So it felt wonderful to be a part of that. So by the time Mr. Hayden became the Poet Laureate in 1976, I was beginning to see the complete workings of the newspaper. I had been guilty of reading only a part of what Baha'u'llah had written. He had continued, but it behooved the writers and editors, therefore, to be sanctified from the prejudices and egotism and desire, and to be adorned with the ornament of equity and justice. They must inquire into matters as fully as possible in order that they may be informed of the real facts and commit the same to writing. Concerning this wronged one, what the newspapers have published for the most part has been devoid of truth. Good speech and truthfulness are, in loftiness of position and rank, like the sun which has risen from the horizon of the heaven of knowledge. Having taken that second part to heart, in 1981, I quit the newspaper. I realized that what I was doing was inadequate in relation to what Baha'u'llah described in the Tablet of Terzat. I also realized that what I was doing was dangerous to the Black community. Being a Black man in America and a Baha'i who was a Black man, the following was very important to me. And it's that last sentence on that phrase. Good speech and truthfulness are, and loftiness of position and rank, like the sun which has risen from the horizon of the heaven of knowledge. I had hoped to be a part of that mirror world written about by Baha'u'llah. But in 1982, I found myself at age 42 in college classes as an adult college student seeking a degree. As a husband and a father of 2 children, I spent the next 6 years getting my Bachelor of Fine Arts and my Master of Fine Arts degrees. And I got through by telling myself constantly that one day I would be 50 years old. I'd be 50 years old with that degree or without that degree. And the degrees were important if I were going to take and make the next steps necessary to being a responsible artist. Because being an artist who could be more truthful than being a newspaper photographer was important to me. But this is a talk also about the Black Men's Gathering. In 1988, I was 48 years old. I still had another year to study for my Master of Fine Arts degree, and I got a call from Dr. William Roberts, Billy. He had invited me to attend the meeting. He invited me to attend the meeting that he was planning at the Louis Gregory Bahá'í Institute. Now, I must share with you that at that time, my family had very little money. I had no car that I trusted to drive more than a few miles, and I didn't dare think of driving that car for 1,400 miles round trip. I didn't drive it if I couldn't catch a bus and get back home. But for some reason, I felt that I should accept that invitation and go to Louis Gregory in the Louis Gregory Bahá'í Institute in South Carolina. I mean, after all, Dr. Roberts had just been appointed as counselor, and he invited me to be a part of something. If he invited me to be a part of something, it had to be important. So somehow, my wife and I got the money together to purchase a round-trip train ticket from Philadelphia to Fayetteville, South Carolina. And I was on my way to something that would change my life. So many things happened at that meeting that it would take another hour of my 20 minutes to share with you metamorphosis that happened. And the best way to share with you is to share 2 questions asked by my wife when I returned home. First question, are you going to do that again next year? Second question, are you going back? And the following year, I heard that other wives asked the same questions of those who attended. In 1989, I got my MFA and I entered the world of art. It meant not only that I could, but I had the responsibility to do those things that I couldn't do at the newspaper. And I wanted to change how the world viewed me as a Black man and us as Black men. As a photographer who was an artist, I felt that I still had the obligation and opportunity of being a mirror of the world. I began to do work and show in galleries and museums, and I even sold some work. However, as noted in the recent letter from the Universal House of Justice dated July 22nd, 2020, they wrote, sadly, however, your nation's history reveals that any significant progress toward racial equality has invariably been met with countervailing processes, overt and covert, that serve to undermine the advances achieved and to reconstitute the forces of oppression by other means. So even as a child, I was interested in how Black men were represented in newspapers. I searched the newspaper for stories and photographs of Black people and images of Black men. The images of Black men appeared only when Black men had committed a crime, and often as a comic feature. The newspaper was also guilty of how women, Asian, Hispanics, Latinos, indigenous people were represented or not represented. I refer to the lack of photographic images and or the use of only negative representations of those mentioned as photographs by omission. I didn't see the mirror of the world that I knew. The simplest photographic image in a newspaper is a headshot. And the headshot is the image that identifies the subject of a newspaper. And I thought I could use the headshot as a subject for a body of artwork. As I thought about how to do that, there were two things that kept speaking to me. Of primary importance was Baha'u'llah's many references to dust. He wrote, "O son of dust, blind-eyed eyes that thou mayest behold my beauty. O moving form of dust, I desire communion with thee, but thou wouldst put no trust in me. O children of dust, tell the rich of the midnight sighing of the poor." Mm. The other thought that kept forcing its way into my head was Robert Hayden's book, Heart Shape in the Dust. I felt and still feel that those heart shapes are Black men. When I met with the Black men at the Black Men's Gathering in Louis Gregory, I felt like we were all heart shapes in the dust. As a photographer, I'd been used to printing silver gelatin prints. And I didn't want to make my new headshots, my new images with silver because the material used as a metaphor is important to me. And silver is a rare metal. The form and content is important in my work. And I wanted my work to be influenced by the writings of Baha'u'llah. I also wanted to pay homage to Mr. Hayden's book, Heart Shape in the Dust. Having independently studied the chemical history of photography in depth, I knew that I could make a light-sensitive liquid glue using the protein casein. I knew that I could suspend dust in the light-sensitive glue and make a photographic print. The poet Robert Hayden and that book, Heart Shapes in the Dust, had become very important to my art, and I could make dust-shaped hearts. One day I parked my car in a parking lot that required a parking lot attendant to register my name and enter time into a log before my going into the office or the building. The parking lot attendant, a Black man, checked my name and the license plate. He asked me if I was the artist on camp. I was surprised that he knew me and said yes. He smiled and told me, "Your work makes me feel like somebody." I heard that when Mr. Hayden died in 1980, reporters were trying to find friends and neighbors to get comments about his life. I heard that a gas station attendant told a reporter, "I didn't know that he was important. I just thought he was a really nice guy." And I liked that. He was a major poet and essayist. He was a poet laureate consultant in poetry to the Library of Congress. And he was a really nice guy. He and the Black Men's Gathering made me feel like somebody. Baha'u'llah wrote, "O son of spirit, noble have I created thee, yet thou hast abased thyself. Rise then unto that for which thou wast created." I began to feel noble. And thank you.
Don, you're just leaving us hanging, man. Thank you so much. Really, it was wonderful, wonderful. Well, friends, now is a moment that we have to respond to some questions that you may have. Let me just thank these brothers so much for their contributions. I'm very moved today. And, you know, you get a sense of how important the arts are and the contributions that really help to really blossom, make our lives blossom. So The floor is open, and I think Jessica is going to assist us in welcoming people in to ask their questions. So Jessica, are you there?
Yes, I am here. Okay, first we have a question from Ann Perry. Let me let her in the room.
Hello, Ann.
I am.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can hear you, but we can't see you. Are you there?
Oh, I'm here.
Okay, very good. Go ahead, please.
I want to thank you all. And like last night, this is a very moving session. And just to share, twice I had the opportunity to attend the last day of the Black Men's Gathering at Acre when they would open it up to the public. And it was like being immersed in a sea of beauty. I will never forget the joy and the depth and the drumming, the singing, and the new vision that I experienced there. And walking down the road in Elliott to the grave of Louis Gregory together, and then singing and chanting and praying there and drumming. I mean, words cannot express that. So I've always enjoyed sharing as a white woman how I got to experience the Black Men's Gathering. Now here's my question. Robert Hayden was an exquisite and a consummate craftsman, and he would sometimes decline committee appointments because of his dedication to poetry. Some Baha'is criticized him for this and wanted to see him be more, quote, active in the faith. Yet what he achieved put him in the eyes of the world as a poet that America could truly be proud of. So what are your thoughts about balancing our lives between service to the faith and commitment to art?
Derik, would you try to respond to this?
Thanks for your question. And this is, one thing that people who know Hayden sort of know about him, right, is that he sort of had a kind of devotion, as you said, to art and to craftsmanship that he thought sort of required him to kind of wall himself off from certain things. And you look into some of his personal writings, and you will see him say, he's talking to himself, and he says, don't reveal yourself to anyone, right? Because that would compromise the truth of the artist's work, right? Only express yourself through art, so that as though you're channeling, the very essence of your being into this art. And if you were to reveal yourself in other ways, it may somehow compromise your ability to create. That was Hayden's own sort of approach to the issue. I feel that, in the Baha'i faith, we are given the bounty of, calling ourselves to account each day and trying to figure out how we work toward the ideal which is established for us in the revelation. And of course, we know from the example of Abdul Baha that, servitude and service to the faith are the highest kind of expression of worship that we can do. And some people, I think, are going to be able to do it in different ways. And there's a diversity of methods of, serving the cause. And of course, I witnessed that in my own family. I was educated in the Baha'i faith, by my parents, and they taught me about the importance of service, but also that, one had to be devoted to their profession as well, right? And so there was always this balancing that I could see in my parents' lives, and that I saw many people, many brothers in the gathering also being able to do this balance. And I think it is, in terms of the artist, the artist that's their vocation, that's their profession, and they figure out how to make their art a service to humanity. And I'll say one more thing. At the gathering, there was one time where there was this one brother who came. I think he only came 1 year, but I was asking him about how he became a Baha'i, and he had actually become a Baha'i because of the poetry of Robert Hayden. He had such admiration for the craft of this artist, and through that, he began to investigate the faith. So I don't think that there's any sort of one particular answer to that question, but obviously as individuals, we grapple with the degree to which we serve. You know, that's one of our requirements. We always have to think about what more can we do in service and how we're gonna serve. So, you know, I don't think that there's one answer to that question.
Maybe I can also add, I think actually David Wallane just put in the chat line something that I was going to say, and that is Robert Hayden was an editor of World Order magazine. And so that's an example of some service in addition to doing. So it wasn't that he just simply rejected all other sort of service. He made choices. And I think each one of us, no matter who we are, have to really look at what our capacity is and look at opportunities for service and decide whether or not we're able to really contribute on that level. So he did do some service. So thank you very much, Anne. I think there's someone else.
Yes, I can't seem to call this person into the room, but Kevin is wondering, he says, are the letters written from the Black Men's Gathering to the Universal House of Justice available for review? If so, how might we obtain copies?
So currently those letters are not available, meaning they're not all put together in one place, but they soon will be available because we have two people who are working on the second volume. Actually, I think some of them are in the first book on the Black Men's Gathering, which you can, I think there's a link to it on the invitation you got for this meeting at the Publishing Trust. But there's a second, more extensive volume that's in production now, being written by Richard Thomas and Frederick Landry, and hopefully soon to be completed. And in it, it will have a much wider variety of materials so that you'll be able to see these kinds of things there. Someone else?
This is our last question. I'll pull Barbara into the room.
Hi, Barbara Talley.
Hi, everybody. I'm so glad to see all of you. I have a question for, well, I love Don Camp. I wish you had put a copy of his picture there. I mean, it still blows my mind what he was able to do with milk, you know, and dust. But the question was for you, Billy.
Barbara, you can see, oh gosh.
There you go.
There's one of the pictures. Unfortunately, it's me, but but
well,
he took a
I copied the link, and I'd seen some last year at Pody, but I just thought when I saw that, it was just, I mean, it kind of blew my mind. I still can't even get how brilliant his mind could be to create something like that, even think about doing it, less known doing it. But my question for the arts, Billy, was for you, in that I've heard that you do this wonderful beadwork. And so not only being such a, you know, a proficient gatherer of souls and transforming of men, you also are an artist. So my question to you is, what prompted your art? Did you see your mama doing it one day, or you just, I don't know how, tell me about your art, Billy.
Well,
yeah, please.
Patrick is actually showing, I don't know if you all can see, a set of beads or prayer beads that I made for him. Do you see those, friends?
Yes.
Anyway, it really is, I don't consider myself an artist. I really just am somebody who is more like a doodler. So I'm trying to learn, and yeah, that's all I can say about that. You've embarrassed me, Barbara.
Well, people have been raving about these beads, and I'm like, okay, I want to see these beads, Billy.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Eugene Dixon wants to know where their beads are.
Yes, I'm sure he does. You know, this is something I will tell you that I don't take orders for. All right, Patrick, thank you. I don't take orders for it. I just do them, and eventually people receive them. So,
we hear you.
Did you have another question, Barbara, that you wanted to pose?
Well, that was it. And just to say how, just a comment that it was so, I'm so happy to see this. I mean, just so happy to see it, because in so many spaces where I'm at, they're saying, where are the Black men? That's the question I get. I'm like, I don't know. Now I can say they're here on this line. They're here in Green Acre. They make their rounds. But yeah, I think as Black women, we want to see our Black men. You know, we want to see them rise, because as someone said here, we always see them in their worst. Don was saying that how we see them as criminals, this and that. And look at the powerful, beautiful, smart, brilliant Black men that are on here. This is what I want people to see. When they hear Black men, I want to see more. I want them to see you guys. And we want to figure out together, how do we do that? How do we change that old narrative that's been put out there, that these are the Black men, and instead of the Black men that are on this page.
Thank you very much, Barbara. All right, is there another question?
Well, Frank actually asked, Frank, do you want to come on and ask your question?
Sure. Thank you so much. Again, just like last night, incredibly moving. Derik, I wanted to ask you about the follow-up of that story you told about you coming into the room and the brothers saying they felt you were posturing. I'm curious, you know, being African-American and growing up in suburbia, I feel like sometimes the real me is trapped somewhere deep inside, and I put up these walls, and those walls lead to posturing. And it sounds like the stories from the BMG, between the love and the vulnerability, you're able to like shed that. So I don't know. I don't know if that relates to your story, but I'm curious, did you agree with their assessment? And then what was it that you felt like you had to change? What were you able to shed from the comments from them?
Well, these dudes, they were joking with me. I mean, I was like, you know, when they said that, I was like, man, I was not posturing, man. You know, like I was like, that's what I was thinking. I was like, man, I can't believe they said that, you know. But it was, you know, I feel like you're right in that, like so many of us, like we have that sort of compulsion for all these kinds of for all these reasons, primarily sort of defensive mechanisms, to posture in certain ways, right? To build our kind of image of ourselves in certain ways so that we remain impervious to the kinds of slings and arrows that get shot at us, you know, at all times, and in so many different kinds of contexts. So, you know, I mean, like, and I think you summed it up perfectly, beautifully, right? In that community of love and humility and care and compassion, right? You could let go of so much of that, right? And you could kind of allow your, you know, your truest self to sort of to come through. And, you know, without that kind of safety, right? Without that kind of community and the love of that community, it's really hard to do that. But I think that, you know, one of the things that happened, and many of the brothers could talk about, right, is that, you know, through the experience of the gathering, right, it didn't just mean that they could shed these layers within the gathering. It also allowed them the kind of, I think, the fortitude and the courage to do that outside the gathering as well, right? So you got, like you saw people who let go of all of these trappings, you know, of the world, and were able to serve, I think, really in powerful ways, you know? So it wasn't just in the gathering itself, it kind of went on beyond that, I think, too.
Can I share something, Frank? You addressed it in a very colorful way, brother. You're looking good. Anyway, I just want to share this. This notion of posturing is a gift to the gathering from someone who is very dear to us, and that was a member of the International Teaching Center, Counselor Magdalene Carney. Mag wrote to us, you know, after the first gathering in Greensboro. Of course, I said yesterday, we wrote to the World Center, we wrote to the Teaching Center, we wrote to the House of Justice, and then they responded. And Mag actually sent a tape. And you'll also remember that Jean Andrews, who was in that first group, went immediately to serve at the World Center. And, you know, together they organized themselves, and along with Jean's wife, Nancy, and sort of put together a little audio tape of greetings to the gathering that happened in June 1988, the one that Don went to, the first one that he went to. And among the things that she said was that she had just had a collection of people coming to the World Center for meetings, including counselors from all over the world. And she noted a marked distinction between the men counselors and the women counselors. And she said, one of the things that she noticed, and she and her colleagues noticed, at that point, Dr. Khan, Peter Khan, was also a member of the teaching center, and they were sort of like cut buddies, the two of them, you know. And she said one of the things that they noticed was that the men tended to posture, and that the women counselors did not. They were devoid of that.
Right.
And they noted that it was a part of the larger society sort of shaping of men and expectations of men that they did this. Now, she went on to say that she had a hope that that would not happen among Black men because it would not serve us. So this was one of the things, one of her messages. Now, I'll just go on to say that after that June gathering, Don Camp went to the World Center on pilgrimage. And when he was there, I think Meg invited him to dinner at her apartment, if I remember correctly. And she wrote to me afterwards and she said, I've met Donald Camp, who came to the Black Men's Gathering. Now, many of you know that the World Center, well, you know, I think the Guardian described the pilgrims as bringing new blood into the World Center, you know, replenishing the thoughts and ideas. So the Baha'is coming from the field share their experiences as they move through the World Center. And so those who serve at the World Center, particularly in these institutions, really look forward to consulting and hearing from the believers as they pass through during their pilgrimage. So she wanted to know from Don, what is your experience of being in the United States as a Black person and as a Baha'i and etc. And then Don told her about his experience at the gathering. And she said she was thunderstruck. She wrote to me this letter. She was thunderstruck and so moved because she saw in him a new creation. And that's how she described it, a new creation. And I think she must have gotten that from him. But she was so entranced by that encounter because it said to her, it sort of punctuated for her the power of this experience of the Black Men's Gathering. So this idea of posturing, you see, we've held dear to the gathering since virtually the very beginning. And it's been very, I think, as Derik has said, as Don has said, you know, and Patrick in his way has said, you know, that, you know, it really has assisted us really to adopt this stance of humility and to understand what that means, especially in relation to one another. I was so tickled to hear about this encounter because there are a lot of encounters that happened up in, what was that house that you all stayed in up there in Derik? What was the name of it?
I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, it's this house at the top of the drive where the younger guys used to be sort of stay together because there was more mixed. What do you call it? Like a bunkhouse kind of.
Probably Rogers.
Probably Rogers Cottage. Yeah. Because a lot of wild things used to happen among the young brothers there. But I'm so tickled about this because really they were joking because he was so far away from posturing. In fact, I had to cajole him really into doing that task because he was so hesitant, not wanting to sort of put himself out. But he was the right person to do it and they appreciated it. But you know, this is the brothers, you know, you do your best and they're still gonna razz you. And this is one of the beautiful things about who we are together.
Can I interject something, Billy?
Yes, please.
That's also divisive. You can't live my experiences and I can't live yours, you know what I mean? So you shouldn't have to apologize for living well, you know what I mean? So you shouldn't have to, why? You know what I mean? Regardless where you grew up or who you are, what you look like, what tone your skin is, if you're a brother, you're gonna catch it. You know what I mean? So like Dave was talking about, one of the most beautiful part of the gathering was the diversity.
Yeah. And
you could just be yourself in that diversity and you were accepted. You know what I mean? So the thing of it is man, that's game. Just do you, you know, and become the beauty of it is that I can love myself with all my faults, all my background, all, you know, and then mistakes I'm gonna make. I can still serve Baha'u'llah and be loved by Baha'u'llah and be loved by others. So man, let that, please, you grew up well, you had your parents, you had your people, You sitting up here serving that Green Acre, man. Who cares what some brother think about what you doing? Man, you do you serve Baha'u'llah, and most of them envy your spirit anyway. So let them do their catch up.
You good?
Yes, sir.
Very good, very good. So you hear his message, Frank. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good, good. So this is something I think we can hope that, will also will influence the Baha'i community at large, which is, look, we have to make space for everybody and really back off of the judgments and really welcome souls to come and offer their share to the movement of this community forward. I wonder if there are any other questions or comments. Yes, please.
Yes, there are. David Walleen, he's asking, we have a couple of CDs of music from the BMG. We probably bought them at Greenacre years ago. Are CDs still available or other electronic versions?
So no, they are no longer available in print. However, those of you who would like, I may be getting myself in trouble here, but those of you who would like, I think Sherilyn last night asked for some of the music, and so I have some MP4s I can share with you if you're interested. You should just put it in the chat, your email, and hopefully there's not going to be, I'm not going to be overwhelmed, but we'll try to respond to that in due course. All right, David, let me know. All right. Any other questions?
Yes, Brad says, thank you all for this, really beautiful and inspiring. A personal question for you all. Are you all involved in the Institute process? And if so, what is the composition of your respective groups or even of your devotional gatherings?
Who's involved with study circles, tutoring? I certainly am.
I am.
Yeah, I am.
Yes, please. Well, so all of us are. So why don't you each just say a little bit about your study circles? I'm busy writing down these requests.
So one of the things that I'm doing, we just started with the Thomases, with Richard and June Thomas and Kenny Thomas. I'm surrounded by Thomases. And Paul Harrison. Is that we're doing artistic, similar to what we're doing here. We're doing artistic devotionals and trying to expand that into our communities. That's one thing I'm doing. Another thing I'm doing is hey, I'm doing a book one with some folks. You know what I mean? I'm doing a book one with some folks. So that's and Zoom to death.
Oh. Yeah, I'm doing Laureate online with the O'Neills. And yeah, there's a lot of O'Neills. But it's really wonderful because there are like 48 people in the group, and we break out into rooms of 7 or 8. Artistically, I don't think it's, we're not doing anything particular, but I'm just really very amazed. And Zoom is just a wonderful tool. People talk about social distancing. I think this thing that we do when we meet people and families and things, I think that's like physical distancing, but it's not social distancing. I'm looking at Zoom as like this new social phenomenon that's it's going to be with us in our personal lives in a whole new way for centuries, possibly. I mean, it's just a new link. It's a wonderful new link. So I'm just kind of amazed at that at this point.
Yeah, I would agree with what Don just said in terms of like the possibilities that got opened up through Zoom. In some ways, as Patrick said, it's kind of like, man, it's almost too much. You feel like you might turn into a Zoom square. Like you're so rectangular or something. But yeah, I mean, we like right now we're doing a book one. I'm co-facilitating or co-tutoring with the son of one of the brothers from the gathering who's going to be on tomorrow, Teddy Lawrence. Amani Lawrence is my sort of co-tutor with a group of youth, a very diverse group of young people doing the new book one. And then We have book 8 that I'm tutoring with. It's probably about 21, 22, all Black Baha'is, and some people are not Baha'is. And Barbara Talley helped to organize that, so we do that one. And then my wife and I have a monthly devotional gathering, which tries to connect all the continents. So we try to get from every continent every month, and we've had a good amount of representation from Africa, which is really a beautiful thing for that devotional gathering. Billy has supported us in that. Wow. In there. Yeah, the Institute process, the core activities, these are the ways that we're advancing the cause. And one of the things that I think that we try to do is integrate the kind of perspective of, Blackness into these kinds of activities. And that, I think, enlivens them in a way that a lot of people appreciate. And so we've had a lot of experimentation going on in the Zoom life, with those kinds of things.
And what you just did with ABS, which was phenomenal.
Thanks, Don. Thanks.
So I want to I'm just gonna read out these names: Barbara Talley, Karen Anderson, Chris Gordine, David Williams, Jean Dixon, Patricia Josie, Marzia, Joy, Sherilyn, Judy Behrent, Tony Sims, somebody, Wales City, I can't remember who that is, and Alyssa somebody. Those are the names that I have who would like to have CDs. If I missed you, please go in the chat and add it again, okay? Thank you very much. I can just say that I also am a tutor of study circles, and currently, there's a new book 1. And for those of you who haven't experienced it, it's really wonderful. And currently the training institutes all across the country are providing some unique training for it. It's a major commitment because it's a shift in the thinking of how book 1 will be used. And it's very exciting because it's also inclusive of many other people. So I wonder if there's one last question, Jessica, because I'm respectful of the time. And I also want to ask you, is this chat going to be preserved? Because there may be I see there are more emails on there that I'll need to, maybe you can help me get them. Okay, Jessica?
Yes, definitely. Okay, Andrea, I have a question about resiliency. Many youth and young adults feel exhausted to engage in dialogue about race. Often think of how our elder generations, and I can't imagine how they are feeling. What advice would you offer to us about avoiding burnout and despondency?
So, Don, you want to take this one?
That's a hard one. I guess I'm kind of obviously the one to answer it because of this. Burnout.
Can you ask the question again?
Yeah, the person put it in the chat, so I'm having a hard time finding it. Give me just 1 second here. Here we go. Many youth and young adults feel exhausted to engage in dialogue about race. I often think of our elder generations, and I can't imagine how they're feeling. What advice would you offer to us about avoiding burnout and despondency?
Oh, you find new ways. I think what you do is you find new ways of introducing new concepts. I think there are a lot of people who are genuinely interested but ignorant of what the dynamics are. But there's always a new way of presenting something to understand some simple things. Let me see if I can think of a really quick example, which I can't, unfortunately. But well, I guess I have to put it in the same way that I do my art. Every now and then, I just get tired of doing my art, and I find that I have exhaled for too long, and I haven't taken the time to inhale. or to get together a new me. And once I get a new me, I can go back to work again. And sometimes that new me socially is just, I'm frustrated. I can't take it anymore. And so I have to, I have to go out again, and I either lash out or I pray out, or, I do some other things in order to reconstruct, what the situation is. We can't afford to burn out. Just simply can't afford to burn out.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me add a word to that, if it's all right, and that is that I think each one of us has to decide what our capacity is and what our limitations are. And I'm reminded of this statement. Everybody has a right to ask a question, but they don't necessarily have a right to an answer.
Mm.
And so I think, particularly those who are Black at this particular time frame, lots of friends who are white or associates who are white are wanting to engage about these issues of race. And often, I don't know what your experience is, but I have a long line of people who are calling saying, could I have a conversation with you?
Yeah.
And I what I have to do is to look and see what my capacity is to engage in that way, because I can't give all my life to those conversations, so I can do some of it, but it has to be up to each individual. So I don't think that has anything to do with age. It just has to do with time and space and, what other obligations you have. And, but I think one must feel not obliged to, but one must want to engage in that level. And so you have to make choices about who you, enter into that kind of conversation with, and whether or not it's going to be meaningful, and whether or not that person is willing to join you in a process of action of community building, because I think that's really what the plan is for. So that would be my additional comment. Well, friends, I think we're probably at the end of our time. I want to take this moment and thank Derik Smith, Dr. Smith, for your wonderful presentation. Patrick Patillo, my brother, very beautiful. And same with you, Donald Camp, dear Donald Camp. And
I'm
so
still Donald.
all of these brothers I love so much. Oluyemi, he's listening, I'm sure. His music was such a contribution. And I think we're going to have a comment by the Greenacre team about yesterday's presentation, today, of course, and then tomorrow is another one. And then we're going to close with a little music from Roger Hogan, saxophonist. Do you want to speak now, Jessica?
Robert, did you have anything you wanted to say?
just extraordinary gratitude to all of you, each and every one of you sharing today, and it was just I found it personally extremely powerful. I think just some logistical things, just so you know. So we're on for our next one about community builders tomorrow at 1 o'clock. You can register on the website greenacre.news. In the coming week, we'll have a recording of all 3 sessions will be available. All of you who've registered and been part of this, will send you an email directly with the link. But it will also be available on our website at greenacre.news. That's the confusing part, it's .news. But it will be there, so you'll be able to have a chance to revisit these wonderful sessions and share them with others.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is Roger Hogan, Auroral Darkness, tribute to Robert Hayden. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good day.